Hello and welcome to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
And today we're going to be talking about the last visa that we wanted to cover, which is the digital nomad visa, which is kind of bundled together with the remote worker visa. Before we get into that, we have two pieces of news, one that we had already planned on talking about, and one that we did not plan on talking about that happened sort of abruptly this morning.
Yeah, so we are recording on Monday, 2 days before this episode will come out, and the Pope passed away just this morning.
And it's been an interesting morning. If you hear bells in the background, they have been intermittently all morning, especially because we have a convent of Saint Francis or San Francesco. Mm-hmm. And obviously the Pope Francis took his name from Saint Francis. So they've been ringing bells all morning, and throughout basically the day they'll be ringing bells. We're going to try to pause and cut if there are any bombs in the background, but sometimes they'll do these little firework bombs type things as a way of saying,
it's like a remembrance thing or a celebration of life sometimes.
So that is the big news this morning. And obviously we're not news reporters, so we have no more information, but that was a sort of a surprise, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. He was an interesting person, and for probably all of his faults, he was a human. He did a lot of good, I think. So,
yeah. And this is coming from, again, two people. We've mentioned this before, but in case this is the first episode you're listening to, neither of us are Catholic or religious. So It is more of a point of big news, and we wanted to address it. And again, I think because neither of us are Catholic, we don't have I don't have a framework to put this in, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely not. He's just somebody who made some pretty decent, statements and strides, even though he sometimes faltered, and now he's gone. So yeah. I don't know. Yeah, interesting time.
And it's going to be interesting, and it's always weird too. Not weird. It's always, it's weird because it's also, I know a lot of people were obviously talking about coming already to Rome in May, and I think one of the articles mentioned they were going to hold off on the elections for another 10 or 15 days. I don't know if it's a period of mourning or the burial or if it's just process. And I imagine a lot of you who are going to be coming in May are going to be curious as to how it affects your trip. And it shouldn't necessarily, but it will mean, obviously, that Rome is going to be a lot more crowded than it normally is. And who knows what will happen. But again, it's always one of those weird things that kind of, to talk about in terms of how does somebody's death affect tourism?
Right.
It's always a weird thing. The other thing, though, we wanted to talk about, speaking of tourism, is, and this is the thing the piece of news we really wanted to, that we had already looked into and wanted to share, was about Venice. We've talked about this before. There was last year a tourist tax, or a fee, if you will, an entry fee, depending how you looked at it, for Venice. And at the end of the year, they were like, we're not sure if we're going to continue this, but we made a lot of money, so we'll see. And of course, everybody, I think, was like, well, that's not true. You're definitely going to continue it. And unsurprising to everyone, they have decided to reenact this fee again this year. It's going to be, they haven't really released it seems like they released some of the information. It looks like it's going to be mostly weekends, mostly holidays, but double the amount of days as it was last time, because they found out in 2024 that some of the days in which there was a fee attached to it, the €5 entry fee, they had more tourism that day than the same day the year previously, which is always a bit of a weird.
But the year previously was still during COVID restrictions, right?
It was coming out. It was the first year without it, COVID restrictions. But I think there was a lot of people who, especially Americans, will book their flight, 6 or 8 months in advance. So it felt like a bit of a false equivalency, because that meant people would have to book their flight to Italy at the end of 2022 when there were still mask restrictions and occupancy restrictions and also travel restrictions. So a lot of Americans were not booking at the end of 2022 for 2023. So a lot of them were booking at the end of 2023 for 2024. So it felt a little bit like a false equivalency. And they've also unveiled that if you book it last minute, which is not the day of, it is, I think,
3 days.
Yeah, within 3 days of your visit to Venice, it will be €10 instead of €5.
Absolutely insane.
It feels kind of like a massive cash grab. It's obviously irked and annoyed and upset a lot of people because there is no clear line as to where this money is going. It is also, that's one big issue. It's basically we're collecting millions of euros, but no one's sure where it's going. It doesn't seem to be going towards helping the city in any way. It doesn't seem to be going, they claim it's to alleviate the pressure of tourism, but there isn't really proof of that.
Right. It's basically the government is saying, oh, guys, don't worry. This is totally going to help. We're going to use this money to help you. But they haven't said where it's going, or like you said, Nathaniel, there's not a fund earmarked for any specific goal. And a lot of Venetians are saying, like, where's the money going? You're not actually doing anything to help the city's issue with tourism. You're just collecting money.
Exactly. And of course, people are, curious, like, are you going to start some public works project, but hire your cousin's construction company? Like, there's a lot of that sort of undercurrent of not even fear, but just anger, because it's like, whoa. This is not helpful. And I think the second largest issues is the fact that it is giving the impression, we've talked about this 2 or 3 times already about Venice, like, is Venice a theme park? And if you want to go listen to those episodes, we have 2 episodes on it, in which we both think it has certain theme park qualities to it, for sure. And I think this adds to it. Like, if all of a sudden, if people start viewing this as, oh, it's €5 for a ticket to see Venice, what a deal, it then almost becomes, then you can do anything in Venice. And I think it makes it worse that there are ticket checkers at every entrance to Venice, which again makes it feel like a theme park. Mm-hmm. And as we saw last year, a lot of those ticket checkers did not check tickets because this isn't a theme park. So it's not like we can just kick you out. You have to, if somebody doesn't have a ticket, you have to get the cops involved. That turns into paperwork. That turns into a legal thing. That turns into a court case. And so a lot of these ticket checkers didn't want to be in court for weeks or months at a time, going through all the different people who basically didn't have a valid ticket. So a lot of them were just straight up not.
I don't understand
checking.
Where these ticket checkers are, because I don't know if we've said this before, in this episode specifically, but if you stay inside of Venice, you do not have to pay this entry fee.
But you do need a piece of paperwork that says you're exempt.
So are the ticket checker people inside?
Yes.
Like they're in Venice and just randomly checking people's paperwork?
And that's exactly it, though. So they're at every entrance, the Santa Maria station. Mm-hmm. And then they're at, I think there's I can't remember the name of the state, but there's when the water taxi comes in from the airport, there's a kind of a main station there. And I think like one of the Lidos, if you kind of come up from the south along the coast and come in, I think obviously at the other ports for the cruise ships and things like that. So there are all these different stations, but even walking around, they are people who are supposed to check to make sure that you didn't like sneak in.
Okay.
And they found that like even all these reporters were like, talking to them like, so what if I don't have a valid ticket? Like, yeah, we're not stopping you. This is ridiculous. Like, it's they feel like it's a waste of their time, because I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was a volunteer position. And that was even worse because a lot of people felt like I have to volunteer to be here. Not have to, but they volunteered to be there. But then they realized like it's not just, oh, you don't have a ticket, here's a fine, because they were not authorized to give fines. Mm-hmm. It was, you have to now show up in court. It's a whole argument process.
None of this seems effective.
And that was the thing, right?
Yeah, that's weird.
And so because functionally speaking, it's not a theme park. It's not a privately owned destination, I guess. It's not like you can simply just kick somebody out. You can just, it's just like any other fee or any other fine, like a speeding ticket or something like that. You could just simply not pay, and then it goes to court. They can't, just kick you out of a city for not paying a speeding ticket. So it's just one of those things. I think there's a lot of, and of course this is not what today's episode is about, but there's a lot of problems with this fee. And I know that you and I in the past, and we will probably continue to do so this year, but we encourage you to not go on the day where you have to pay the fee. We encourage you to go on the other days, because the more of you who do go on the days you have to pay the fee, it encourages Venice to charge more next year. And we have a fun little bee visitor all of a sudden.
Where did it come from?
I have no idea. Sorry, y'all. If you hear buzzing, there's a bee, and it's just going to be, it's springtime in Italy, and there are bees everywhere. Not in our house, thankfully. This one just happened to come through a crack in the door, but there are bees everywhere outside. And no, so anyway, this is simply to say, if you don't go during the times you have to pay this ticket fee, then I think it helps Venice think like, oh, maybe we should alter this a little bit.
Have they released a calendar yet of the days that will be ticketed?
I think so, and we can absolutely put that in the description if they have one. If they don't, we will update this episode as well as the website as soon as they do. And it looks like last year, they're aiming for mostly the weekends as well as big travel days, holidays, things like that.
All during the summer, generally.
Yes,
right?
All during the summer. It's supposed to be from June to September, something like that, June to August, somewhere in there. And I think last they have a claim that most of the day trippers come from, like, this doesn't affect day trippers who live in the Veneto region. And they claim that like most of their tourism comes from people living in the Veneto region who are just visiting Venice for the day, which seems like an absurd claim, unless what they're saying is there's a lot of workers who live in the Veneto region who will go into Venice to work.
Right, which is very
Which is not tourism, it's working. So they're kind of like trying to basically say, well, these people are fine, these people are protected. And it's like, no, it's more about the fact that everyone who properly lives in Venice is now feeling like they're accomplices to, I don't know, some theme park scheme, which they don't want to be part of.
It all doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So this is all to say, we have, over the course of this entire thing, we've taken different stances. We realized some of them on the podcast, but some of them even just like to other people, as we realized how this affects people. Because at first we realized, we thought it was like, it's fine. It's a way for Venice to make money. And then we realized that a big part of it was they're making money, but no one knows where it's going. And if nobody knows where it's going, there's no one to prevent it from going into like, the city councilor's pockets or the city commissioner's pockets or this kind of thing. So,
and I don't know how this decision was arrived at basically by the government, but there doesn't seem like there was a vote of Venetian people or people living in the Veneto region. Like, it doesn't seem like it was a democratic choice. It was just a choice laid out by the government to see, like, a project. Like, let's see what happens with this project.
Exactly.
And a lot of people in Venice seem to dislike it. So,
yeah, that's pretty much it. Exactly. And I think that's their two big news pieces today. And the bee has finally found a place to rest. So with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. We're going to now get started on our lovely...
I do have one more thing.
Oh.
It's just that we updated our last episode. If you listened to our previous episode, we have an update on that. A very cool listener emailed us after they heard that episode to let us know that there had been a recent change. What would you call it? It's
the decree?
A decree, thank you. At the end of March, you said. Basically changing who was eligible for the Jus Sanginis visa. And you know more how to eloquently state what that means, Nathaniel.
No, I think essentially they were just trying to limit the amount of people who could apply in terms of, historically you could be, your great-great-grandparents, and if they were Italian, you could apply, you could reapply for your citizenship through them. And essentially this limited it to being, you had to have a parent or grandparent born in Italy or an Italian citizen who lived here for 2 years to apply for this. Obviously you had to live here, and that was before you were born. It essentially limited it to very, very, very few people. And there's a couple of legal impediments in place, so it's unlikely that it'll be passed into law. But if it does, it would just sort of reinforce this pretty strong anti-immigration stance that Italy has. And as we mentioned in that last episode, if you didn't hear it, we talked about the fact that Italy tends, especially in the last couple of years, they've been very anti-immigration from anywhere. They're very, very, not very, very, but quite nationalistic. And they've really been like, even if you're, my grandparents or whatever it is, Italian, they're like, we still don't want you here. So this is sort of it seems to be like this weird little middle ground area where it's like, okay, if your grandparents are from here, fine, but no one else. And that's again kind of I don't know, it's becoming a sticky situation, I think, because other European countries are seeing this sort of what's happening in the United States right now and saying like, oh, there's a lot of people who are highly, highly qualified, who've all lost jobs, who are all also afraid of their, like, where they are in the States in terms of just maybe their financial future, maybe their, physical safety future, and trying to create like a soft landing area in Europe for them. Because right now, I know Italy, and we've talked about this so many times, I feel like, but Italy right now is undergoing this massive brain drain where everybody, as soon as they get their college degree, they leave Italy or they move to like Milan or something. But even places like Rome are sort of struggling to hang on to what Italy calls a highly skilled worker. They're going to Germany, they're going to Switzerland, they were going to the United Kingdom, not so much anymore. But this is all to say is, even a lot of them are going to the United States. And this is all kind of there seems to be this rubber banding effect, I feel like, where people are coming back to Italy, but Italy's kind of like, no, we don't want you to come back. And I don't know, it seems very weird. We talked about it in the last episode, but it seems a lot of people on the ground here are happy for it. But
happy for immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in power are not so happy for it. And again, This is sort of limited to, not just like the protests necessarily you see, but more like even in super small towns where things are just dying. Police towns are just, they're all of negative. We talked about the Matera episode. It's one of the very few cities in the South, possibly the only one in Basilicata that's actually growing instead of shrinking. Even the capital city of Potenza, I don't know if it might just be stagnant, but so many are either stagnant or shrinking. So it's so rare to see a city in the South that's actually growing in terms of population. And so this entire decree just made it seem really weird in terms of like, oh, so you're making it even more difficult now. And as you're, as a nationalistic country, you're talking about how you want Italians. These are people who, they're just trying to reclaim their Italian citizenship. And now, so it became this really weird thing. There's a lot of legal impediments in place that a lot of lawyers think it won't pass as a law. If it does, or if it doesn't, they have until the end of May to decide, because that's when the 60-day timer runs out. And then then they'll either allow you to submit paperwork again if you have a great-grandparent or great-great-grandparent. And if they pass into law, I imagine this will be just another fun 5 or 10 years of court cases.
Yeah. So what does that mean for you? If you are trying to get your Jus Sanginis, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but if you're trying to get that citizenship, if you're trying to claim your birthright citizenship here in Italy and you're getting your paperwork together, keep on, plug it along. We do not suggest that you stop or let this, waver you. Just keep on going because, like Nathaniel said, at the end of May, they will make a decision as to whether this decree stays or goes. And I don't know. There's just always new things that they're trying to do to either allow more people in or fewer people in. And if you stop filling out your paperwork and applying, it might only hurt you. So just keep on going.
And not to mention, the decree stated that anybody who had submitted their paperwork by March 27th, which was the day before the decree took effect, which was the day before the decree was even mentioned to the public, you were fine. All your paperwork was fine. You were submitted. You're good. You're in the process. And which is why we suggest going ahead with the paperwork anyway, because if there is even like a 2-day window in between this decree ending and like maybe they sign another decree, maybe it's something else, but even there's just the slightest window, that's the day where you send in the paperwork and you hope for the best kind of thing, because they're okay about that. They're like, well, you got it in the window, you're fine. It's just more about if you're not in the window, then it's trying to have this whole argument about, well, I was already, it's a whole thing. So yes, we have updated that last episode if you'd like to go back and listen to it.
And we will keep you all updated as best we can as this decree is decided on at the end of May.
Absolutely. So with a little bit more further ado, I just want to say thank you all so much for listening. Our intro statements. Thank you all so much for listening to this podcast in general. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who have been leaving reviews, who have been following us. We've noticed, especially after we changed it to an Italy travel podcast, I think a lot more of you have found us. When I say a lot, I do mean like 75 of you have found us, which seems like a lot because,
hello.
I know, exactly. It really has been incredible. It's so thank you all so much for finding us and for listening to us. We really, really do appreciate it. We appreciate all the kind words, all the comments, all the people who reach out, who message us. And we genuinely appreciate it. And if you'd like to follow us, you can. I think Spotify and Apple are really the easiest ones to follow. We are on a couple other podcast network things, but I'm not sure how they work. So if there's a follow button there, feel free to click it. And if you'd like to leave us a review, you can do so on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Last but not least, if you like what you're listening to and you'd like to support us in a financial sense, you can do so at, we have a Ko-fi, which is a Ko-fi. There's another website called Buy Me a Coffee. This is not related. This is similar and probably came out at the same time, and nobody wanted to close out of theirs, so or nobody wanted to change their name. So it's like a Patreon. It's just, if you'd like to donate some money to keep us going, we would genuinely appreciate it.
And thank you so much to those who have already donated since we announced it on our last episode. It's been really amazing. Thank you so much.
A massive thank you. Seriously, truly. It has been, it was very heartwarming. We didn't expect anything, and our expectations were blown away. So thank you all so much for donating. I don't know. It's just such a nice thing to see. So
and we're going to get new mics once we reach our mic goal.
I'm so excited. I am so excited. I can't see Darcy's face between the pop filter and the mic. We're just can see eyebrows and the top of the eyes. So this is a fun, we're very excited for new mics one day. Mm-hmm. And if you'd like to follow us, we're going to keep the Instagram. It's at Only a Bag Podcast. We just realized a lot of you do reach out to us through Instagram, and it feels weird to close out of it now. So at Only a Bag Podcast. We also have a Blue Sky at Only a Bag. If you'd like to use an email address, we're at onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. And then, of course, you can always reach out through our website, onlyabag.com.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, questions about your upcoming trip to Italy, or if you have suggestions for episodes, anything like that, you can reach out to us on all of those platforms.
Absolutely. So let us talk about the Digital Nomad Visa,
okay,
which I took notes today. And if you've heard any of the other episodes in which I've taken notes, there's some curious pauses. There's some long staring moments. We don't record any of this with video, but if we did, there'd be a lot of dead air. So
yeah, we cut that dead air out as Nathaniel tries to read his own handwriting.
Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not great either. It's not even good, but it's handwriting. Someone can understand it.
So we're talking about the Digital Nomad Visa and the other thing that's very similar.
And that is actually the first thing I want to talk about.
Oh, good.
So in
Segues.
2022, Italy announced they would be coming out with a digital nomad visa in beautiful, perfect Italian fashion. They gave no other information and then seemed to forget about this entirely. In 2024, as a surprise to everyone everywhere, they announced that, oh, by the way, here it is. And so everyone's like, oh, did you consult anyone who was like a digital nomad? No. We did our best approximation of what this should be. So it is technically two different visas, or one visa that has two different sort of categories. And we talked about this before in the work visa episode. There's a self-employment visa, and that falls under freelancer, entrepreneur, and then like I think business owner or startup owner, something like that. But it's these three categories that all have to apply for the same visa, but they all have three slightly different requirements. I feel so bad for whoever's on the other end of this visa thing trying to figure out paperwork. It's a nightmare. I also want to throw out, this is my personal opinion, if I were not in Italy right now, trying to figure out which visa I want to apply for, and I'm a digital nomad, I would pump the brakes slightly on this digital nomad visa. I say that because Spain has a pretty advanced, not advanced, but it's been more established.
Mm-hmm.
Portugal's the same way. I want to say some Eastern European. I know that like Romania is really popular for digital nomads. I assume there's a digital nomad visa, but I don't know if there's just a much more lenient tourist visa or something. I also know that a lot of Southeast Asia, specifically like Indonesia, they are tourist digital nomad visas for a lot of Southeast Asian countries, but they also seem to be super lenient on people working on their tourist visa, like at least online. So I'm really unsure of how this works in other countries. Which is simply to say, though, if you find another country that's like, oh, that's actually much easier, do that instead.
But also, we have had, before this episode, several other episodes on other kinds of visas. So if you want to be a student here, if you somehow make enough money to be on the
elective residency
visa, anything like that, there might be other options that you can apply for, and also keep you doing your digital nomad thing that is not related directly to your visa. Does
and
that
actually,
make sense?
I think we've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it here now too. If you're looking to come to Italy and you're really, really open about what you want to do, especially if you're just trying to get out of the States or get out of Australia or get out of the UK or just get out of anywhere, the student visa really does seem to be the easiest visa to apply for, the easiest visa to get accepted for. There doesn't seem to be any limits. And when I say seem to be, we couldn't find some on the consulate website. We couldn't find it on the immigration website for Italy. We couldn't find it anywhere. There doesn't seem to be a limit on the amount of people accepted every year, at least one that's publicly stated. So there might be like a sort of behind the scenes thing. You're allowed to work on the student visa up to 20 hours a week, which is fantastic. And because I assume you could also work from home or work from your computer as a digital nomad. And every year you're on the student visa counts towards your citizenship, which is huge because that is not the case in a lot of other countries. I don't think it's the case for the States either. But also there's no limit on how long you can be on the student visa. There are on the other, like the golden visa, it has a limit because they want you to apply for the permanent residency visa after 5 years. So the student visa, you could, I think, be on it for 10 years as long as you have the money. And then last but not least, you can bring family over on the student visa, so if you're like a parent, for instance, and you want to bring over your spouse and your children, you can do so. And there's a very easy mode in which you can do this. So that's why we're so big on this student visa versus the other ones, which are a lot more paperwork and a lot more nuanced. So the digital nomad visa is broken down into a digital nomad visa, which is very specifically for freelancers, consultants, people who just basically work from their computer but don't necessarily have one single employer, and the remote worker visa, which is for people, those of you who can work from anywhere, who are allowed to work from abroad. I'm going to also let you know now, there's a big thing on the digital nomad subreddit that if you are from there, welcome. If you're not from there, there's a lot of people wondering how you stealth work from abroad. You probably cannot do that for Italy.
Does stealth work mean if you work for a company, they track when you're online and basically know what country you're in while you're working?
Exactly, yeah. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, and I want to know more about this, and I will know more about this going into the future, and because I want to do a couple more articles on this for the website, but I believe an American company has to pay taxes based on where their workers are located, which is one of the big things during the whole work from home thing. Certain states have different tax requirements than other states, so it was like, oh, you're there? That's pricey. Or people that were working from different countries had different tax requirements, and it made it really expensive for some of these countries for their tax burden, for lack of a better word. And so what a lot of people on the digital nomad subreddit try to do is route all of their, like they rent their house, or they rent their house out, I should say, but they say like, I have one room that's a server room, and all of my traffic is routed through this room in my house and then to the company.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it's not like the most difficult thing in the world to set up, it seems like, but it's also not the easiest. There's a lot of ways it can go wrong. And it makes sense because a lot of companies, like IT companies, they tend to work with what they consider sort of like, not top secret, but certainly like privileged information in terms of like, we don't want other companies getting their hands on this. So if you're actually working from like Southeast Asia or something like that, we're going to be assuming you're selling this information to a Southeast Asian company. I had literally just read an article, actually, this in the UK. Apparently, they are now really highly suggesting that people do a face-to-face interview or some sort of some Zoom interview where you can see somebody's face, because apparently they had been unwittingly, a lot of these UK companies had been unwittingly employing North Korean workers who were working from home in North Korea, and then paying their wages to obviously the North Korean government instead of like as a private thing.
Right. And probably not working in like fair and equitable conditions.
But a lot of it was just also like there was to take information as well. So,
right, of course.
And this is a big thing during I believe it was during COVID, if I'm not mistaken. It was a lot of workers. There's a weird thing for a very brief few months where you kept seeing this posted. I don't know how much of an actual issue this was, but when people were applying for jobs, because almost everything was work from home, of course. Mm-hmm. So people were applying for jobs they had no business actually applying for, but paying someone else to take their interview. And it was a weird thing because it was like, once you obviously like potentially you might never, if it was not a job that required like daily Zoom meetings with your face, then you might never see this person again. So it was a weird thing where it was like somebody who would know the information about, let's just say, JavaScript, so they would take the interview before you, you'd pay them, and then you'd get the job. And a lot of companies were starting to realize some of the people hired had no idea how to do the job, that they were knocking it out of the park for in their interview. So,
wow, I had not heard about that.
Well, I'm digressing so hard from this digital nomad thing, but if you've never heard of this digital nomad thing, by the way, it is the idea of being a digital nomad is fascinating. If you haven't, I should have clarified like from the beginning, it's just work from anywhere with a laptop. It's a really beautiful idea. I think it's just, there's a lot of problems then attached to it. So, the reason I think that stealth working does not really work out very well, and when I say stealth working, I mean, what if I just applied for this visa and moved to Italy, but my company still thinks I'm in the States, and some people do is they take the Wi-Fi card out of their laptop, so their laptop can never connect to Wi-Fi. They're always hardwired into something that's connecting to their, basically it'll be tunneling back to their house, their server in their house, the whole 9 yards. The issue is that one of the pieces of paper you need is a piece of paperwork from your employer stating that your employer has never broken any labor laws, child exploitation laws, wage theft laws, immigration laws. There's a few others. There's like a little kind of list, but essentially you can't be from a company that has ever exploited its workers. If it has specifically gotten in trouble for exploiting its workers.
Good clarification.
If it has, then you actually cannot apply to be a remote worker in Italy, which is interesting, I think. I don't know specifically the reason for it. I don't know if they're just essentially trying to prevent certain companies from getting a foothold in Italy. I don't know if it's an EU thing where it's basically you can't have a job that's broken like EU labor laws operating technically in Italy.
Oh, okay.
So because you need this from your employer, I think your employer needs to send it or whatever it is. You can't really do that on the sly. So if you're a remote worker and you're trying not to let your company know that you're in Italy, this will not work for you. I'm just going to let you know now. However, if you're a digital nomad and you're a freelancer, it will work for you. So first, let us talk about some of the requirements. And like for all visas, some of these are standard requirements. You need a valid passport. You need passport photos. You need travel health insurance. I think for this one, it's 30,000 euros or $30,000 worth of travel health insurance. It's not that much in terms of a lot of the travel health insurance plans cover that already as like a bare minimum. So the big things are, how much money do you have to make? That's like the big one, because we've both been digital nomads. I'm still technically a digital nomad in the sense that I do work online as a freelancer. You are a painter. So there's neither digital.
I'm semi-digital.
Semi-digital, exactly. So this would have been something that's, I will say, quite difficult for us because we never made that much money, and we still don't make that much money because we don't have those digital nomad jobs that pay $120,000 a year.
Oh no.
So you have to make 3 times the Italian minimum, which as of 2025, if you're listening to this 2025, is 24,789 euros a year. This obviously is...
That is 3 times the minimum?
That is 3 times the minimum.
Okay,
the minimum is like 9,000 and change. Yeah.
Got it.
Because I think we talked about this for the student visa, you only need to make the minimum.
Exactly.
Which is, again, so much easier to clear that, especially, again, if you are like a digital nomad or something. But you need to make 24,789 euros a year. That is... Does that 29,789. That 4 looks like a 9, Nathaniel. Terrible handwriting. So essentially it's 30,000 euros, but this is basically with the exchange rate, it can be a lot higher. Right now it's $1.15 per euro. So this might be closer to 33,000. It can change essentially. If you bring over somebody, if you bring over a spouse, you need 34,089 euros. And then you need an extra 1,550 euros per year, not per month, for every child you bring over, which makes me think that Italy has no idea how much it costs to raise a child.
Yeah, I don't think they do, because it definitely costs more than that. But 1,500?
Yeah, and this is what I don't, and I mean, I don't, again, I'm like, I don't know where that number came from. I get, though, if they're saying that essentially, like, they're trying not to make it prohibitive, because if they're saying, like, well, the average family can make X in Italy, and as long as you make that, you're fine. So I don't know if it's that kind of thing where even, and we've talked about this before, 29,789 is a pretty decent sum of money in Italy. Like, not, I mean, again, we're not talking about like you're buying a Ferrari. But we are saying that like when the average rent, not anymore, but I mean, what, like 700 a month is 800 a month you can find an apartment for in Rome.
I would say 800 is a livable apartment.
1,100
is
for
better.
2 bedrooms basically. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking like for basically 1,100, so a third of your income would go towards rent in Rome. But that's in Rome. You and I pay arguably 400 a month, which includes your utilities, but without utilities, probably 300 a month, 250 a month and that's we have a 2 bedroom. So, and we're not in Rome at all. We're in a small town in the south. But that's all to say is like, if you were in a small town in the south that had fiber internet and you're like, I prefer more the vibe of like being a little secluded so I can work privately and then I can take a drive to the beach. I can take a drive to the train line. You can be on the train line, go to the big city, that kind of thing. 30,000 euros a year is like a plenty sum of money. So it's always hard when somebody's like, oh, that's not very much. It's like, it's not in the States. That's insane in the States. There's no way you're living in the States. But here it's like, oh, you're putting away 15 grand a year in savings. Maybe not, but
I don't know about that one, but I think you could live a decent
I'm thinking
life.
We only spend 55,000 give or take a year on rent, and then maybe another 6 on food and bills. Mm-hmm. Like, so if we made 30, we'd be putting away 15.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You know, it's like 3 or 4 for like leftover fun things.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. And I just want to throw that out there right now. If you're like, what's the income requirement? It's basically 30,000 euros. And that might be $33,000, $34,000, depending what the exchange rate is, maybe less, depending, when you're listening to this kind of thing. It has to be sort of keep it updated in terms of when you apply, they're going to look at the exchange rate around that time. So that is the first and most important thing. The second thing is that money has to come from your work. This is where it gets a little tricky. For those of you who are like, I'm a little bit under the income requirements for the elective residency visa, which, as we've talked about in that episode, has to be about the same amount of money, but only from passive income, no working. So it has to be from your pension. It has to be
like
from
the opposite of this.
Exactly. And there's no way to combine the two. So you can't be like, well, I make 18,000 from my pension, or I make 18,000 from disability, or from something else, something that pays out monthly. So I just really only need to make basically 13,000 and I'm fine. You do not. All 29,000 has to be from the work. So that is the financial requirement. The second thing is the rental agreement. We've talked about this in a couple of these visas as well. When you come to Italy, they do ask that you have a rental agreement. And when I say ask, it's not a question. They demand. It's very clear cut. They want you to have a rental agreement before coming into the country to apply for this visa, because I guess you can come into the country technically. It's more about how it works. For what you have to basically apply is both for the visa and then for what is it called, a permesso di soggiorno. It's like a residency permit. When you apply for the residency permit, it has to be done within 8 days of you arriving to the country. So if you think you can arrive, find an apartment, sign a contract, and then apply for your residency visa, you might be the only person in Italian history to have done so. most people have to get this rental contract before they arrive. And this can be done in two ways. One, you find one of these rental companies that do the little, WhatsApp video call walkthrough, which is they're a dime a dozen now because of how many people do need it. I mean, even just going from other parts of Italy, you want to know what the apartment looks like first, and you cannot trust photos. Let's be honest. Or you do a little stay. You stay for a month or two on a tourist visa. You explore the area you want to stay in. You find some places. You sign some contracts. You go back home, and then you apply for this. So you do, and it does need to be valid for the entire stay of your visa. The digital nomad visa is only, which includes the remote worker visa, is only valid for 1 year at a time. You can basically renew it as often as you'd like, but you still need to hit the bare minimum income requirements and things. We've talked about this before. Most rental contracts in Italy tend to be what's called 4x4, which is a 4-year contract with an option to renew for 4 years at the same rent price. So that's no issue. You can, once you find an apartment you like and you think you have a good shot of getting the digital nomad visa, you can go ahead, sign the contract, and you're pretty much good for 8 years at that rental price. So you don't have to worry about this aspect of it, at least, as you continue to apply. Does that make sense so far?
I think so, yes.
Cool. I'm making sure I'm not running through this way too quickly. Here's where it gets a little bit funky. And when I say funky, I mean weird, I guess. They want you to be a highly skilled worker. So they will not accept this digital nomad. They will not approve your visa if you're not a highly skilled worker.
What does that mean?
They have a list.
Okay.
A lot of things are highly skilled workers in this country.
Okay.
Which is cool. I'm laughing in the sense of it's funny because I think some jobs you cannot work a highly skilled job. I think
some jobs you can't work a highly skilled job.
Yeah, like a student visa. When you have a job, it can't be what they call a highly skilled job.
Right. Okay.
So you have to, be a lowly skilled job. I don't know what that. Essentially their whole point is if you're here on the student visa, you can't be taking a job away from somebody who went to school and studied in the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
Which again, very few jobs. At least that's my understanding. There's you can't be like a lawyer or an accountant for your 20 hours a week kind of thing. You have to be working at a bookshop or a cafe or something.
Okay.
So for the digital nomad visa, you have to be highly skilled. There is a list. We can absolutely add it. It's in Italian, but we can add it to the description of this. And your job has to be under there. You need actually I should start with the degree first. The first thing they want you to have is a degree. Bachelor's, master's, doesn't matter. They want you at least a 3-year degree, which is only because I think Italy's basic degree is 3-year degree. Mm-hmm. In the States, it's a 4-year degree. So I guess an associate degree would not work. A bachelor's degree would work. It's a whole thing. Mm-hmm. But essentially, a bachelor's degree is a minimum of what they want, as well as 6 months of work experience. So you cannot just get the degree at 22 or whatever and then immediately come over to Italy. They want at least 6 months of work experience. If you're a remote worker, this is pay stubs, a W-2, something that says you've been at that company for 6 months. If you are a freelancer, this is, kind of the same thing. Invoices, pay stubs, something to say that you've been doing this for 6 months. If you are like me and you do not have a college degree, you might be thinking, oh, shucks, you're out of luck. But you're not. As long as you have 5 years of professional work experience, you can still apply for this visa. They are, again, it's just like one of the things they really didn't talk to somebody who's a freelancer, because even coming over, they want you to have essentially things like, constant clients. One of these things is they kind of want you to promise that you're going to make a certain amount of money, which is easy at a remote worker. Unless you lose your job, you're going to make, you're
because you're likely salaried.
Yeah. But then with the digital nomad, with a freelancer, I'm like, do you guys understand that freelancers don't always have the same clients? Sometimes you get a job with one person and you might never do anything with that person again because they don't need you again. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit funky. So essentially they want 5 years. They want you to be working for 5 years with invoices, with tax returns, with something to back this up, basically. If you do have a job, and I honestly cannot think of a single one in the States, but this is a digital nomad visa for basically all countries, for all countries that come to Italy. If you have a job that requires your profession to have some sort of certification or some sort of government approval oversight stamp, I guess, for lack of a better word, which is, again, most highly skilled jobs in Italy, you have to get some sort of government certification. I don't know what they would be in the States, honestly. I imagine there's some, but I don't.
If you're like a remote teacher, you might have to have a teaching certificate.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
It's the only somewhat equivalent. I don't know things about jobs but that's one I can think of.
And so that's kind of what they want. Like, as long as if you have a professional certificate, you do have to present that as well. And so essentially, without a degree, it's 6 months of work experience. With a degree, it's 6 months of work experience. Without a degree, it's 5 years of work experience. This 5 years does go down to 3 years if you're in the IT field. I know.
Why?
Darcy's making a face. I have no idea.
That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know if like people in the IT field just age like 40% quicker than the rest of us. I've heard it's very stressful, so maybe that's what it is. If it's like dog years, if like 3 years in the IT field, yeah, you know what you're talking about. I also don't know if it's like things change so fast that they're like 3 years in that field, you're an old soul. So that's the biggest requirements, I believe. I mean, not I believe. I'm reading from my notes, and when I say reading, it really feels like hieroglyphics sometimes. You're like, that could be a
you're getting a general vibe
or a bee, and so that's the biggest things. I guess on top of this is, just want to throw this in there, is the fact that you will need to pay the application fee as well. It is non-refundable. And the reason I do want to mention that is because let's say you get everything together. You have your tax returns, you have your pay stubs, you have your invoices, you have your everything you need, you have your rental agreement. You've already paid your down payment because you have to do that before you actually apply for this. Everything's ready to go. Everything's in order. Then you have to apply. It's a non-refundable fee. It's 30 euros for the bank the post office to facilitate this for you, and that's who will facilitate this for you. It is 50 euros for your permesso di soggiorno, which is your residency permit. It's 16 euros for your tax stamp for them to do all this, which again, I love this country. And then it's 116 euros for the application fee itself. This is an additional 116 on top of the other ones. So it's pretty close to $200 non-refundable. If you get denied, that's it. You can reapply obviously because you still have all this other paperwork, but you have to obviously change whatever you got. And this is, again, I could not find any information that if you're denied, they will tell you why you're denied, tell you when you can reapply, tell you how to reapply. So if you're denied, because it seems like even if you hit all of these metrics, and this is why I'm urging those of you listening to potentially hold off on applying until we know more, I guess, because it doesn't really seem, we talked about this a lot before, this just goes to somebody else. It goes, like, this application kind of goes to a civil worker, basically. And they do get leeway, especially if that worker's in Italy. They get less leeway if they're in a consulate in the States. But if it goes to somebody in Italy, they get leeway. So, which means also that you can hit all these things, but if they think that, like, oh, most of your money came from one big job and we have no proof that you're going to get that job again because because I think one of these things are, if you can show that you've multiple contracts with multiple clients, that's good enough to say that, like, I will definitely make 30,000. Because some of these, I think the self-employment thing as well, they want to show that you make it in the future, like how you can prove that you continue to make this.
That makes sense.
Of course, it is hard when, I think
it's hard to prove that.
Yeah, and I think as a freelancer who typically is like, I can show you how much I made in the past, but not in the future. And so there's a lot of leeway, and apparently even when you have everything in order, you can still get denied, and there really isn't anything to do. You can break your rental contract, which is hard because, again, this 4x4 contract, a lot of them, there is a penalty for breaking. You can talk to the person, though, and explain your situation, and they might take that out of the contract and say, no worries, because, they'll find somebody else as soon as you get denied, kind of thing. And as long as you're still paying rent or whatever it is on the apartment until you move in, they might not mind that. That's a month or two of free rent until you hear back. So it's a bit of I don't know. It seems it's a poorly thought out.
Yeah, it's a lot of requirements for not a lot of information given to the people who might be applying.
That's kind of what it seems to be. It doesn't seem, essentially, and this is like as the end of my notes, basically, because this is literally, I went to 3 different consulate websites: New York, Boston, Miami. It is amazingly incredible how little information there are on these websites, by the way. Not to mention even the paying the fee thing.
For this visa specifically.
Yeah. I clicked, for the fees, click here. And it brought me to another page. I talked about something else, and it said, for fees associated to all visas, click here. I think I clicked 4 or 5 times, got to a page all in Italian. Beautiful, beautiful. None of them were for this visa. None of them were for, like, any permesso di soggiorno. They were all for, like, if you need a passport through this embassy. I'm like, so that's not helpful to anybody. But if you also don't speak Italian, you might not see that there is not listed it is so underbaked and so poorly thought out. And again, we talk about this a lot. A lot of this kind of seems intentional sometimes, where it's like Italy really doesn't want people from other countries here. So they're just like, what if we just put it out there to, like, compete, but really don't want to compete? I also don't know what's happening behind the scenes in terms of if they're doing a test where they're going to make it really, really difficult to apply, and then they slowly ease the difficulty of applications. I do know that like when this first was announced in April of 2024, which is a year ago, I do know my math. There were a lot of people who were talking about it on the Digital Nomad subreddit because, again, Italy is a great place to live as a digital nomad. I think it's often seen as a really expensive place because it's in Europe. And when you come here for a vacation, you get a very expensive side of Italy. And if you step like 5 feet outside of any major city, the prices just tank on everything. So,
or if you start paying rent instead of staying at a hotel,
that's huge
shopping at grocery stores rather than having to go to restaurants all the time. It's significantly cheaper to live here than in many other places.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I think people should be able to take advantage of it without obviously like affecting, hopefully, finding that balance between, I think, because also Italy's a bit nervous, looking at how Spain's affected by it, looking at how Portugal's affected by it, where it has made their housing costs to just explode in price. And
right.
There's just a lot of all of a sudden competition for houses or apartments that were once like, oh, that's a reasonable 400 or 500 euros a month, is now, oh, we have digital nomads that can easily pay 1,000 for that. And so that's what they're competing for. We have a friend in Bali, which is in Indonesia, not in Europe at all. But even he was talking about like for a room in a house, he's like, it's not uncommon for it to be like posted at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. At 3:02, everyone's shown up at the house to look at it. But at 3:04, everyone somebody has rented that house.
And it's also not affordable for people who were born in Bali.
No, he's like, it's
Indonesia.
like about $1,200 a month, $1,300 a month US dollars to rent this room in Indonesia,
which is a problem.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of thing where, and I don't know how it's done. Again, I don't know if those are like specifically licensed in terms of like have the paperwork to be like, this can only be rented to foreigners. Like, so to prevent people from renting like apartments for if you're from Bali, you could rent these apartments. If you're not from Bali, you can rent those apartments. I don't know if there's that kind of separation. Obviously, does not exist in Italy at all. So anybody can rent any apartment. It's also, as you and I have found repeatedly, the rental contract can be very difficult to come by because you are either going to find a transitory contract, which is fine, which is good. It's only good for 6 to 18 months typically, and that will work for this. Or, as a fun alternative, you could find people who have no interest in contracts whatsoever, and they want to rent it to you under the table.
Or someone who wants a very long contract, the 4x4.
Or somebody wants a very long contract. But I think even when you and I first started renting, everybody, especially in small towns, wanted to do it under the table, which is fine. But when we needed it for your residency permit, it was like, we need to find somebody who is willing to, because
put this on paper.
Yeah, there's a tax involved. There's a fee. It means they also have to start tracking the money they make and paying taxes on it, which we're going to talk about, I think, in a future episode, actually, just to sort of some of these interesting pitfalls of living in Italy. But that is the digital nomad / remote worker visa. If you think this one sounds like it has less information than the other ones, it really does. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to know somebody who's been approved for it. If you've been approved for this, by the way, and you have other information, please let us know. Please tell us. Please tell us your experience. Please tell us where I might have gotten something wrong. If it was easier than you thought it would be, if it was harder than you thought it would be. Because it seems like, unlike some of these other ones, these like the student visas and things like that, a lot of people seem to be able to apply for the student visa after getting the rental contract, after getting approved to college, but then almost without, as long as you make the monetary minimum, you get accepted. It's like, yeah. And here it feels like there are some sort of hidden pitfalls because a lot of people have talked about, especially in the digital nomad subreddit, getting rejected and not knowing why. And it just feels, again, Italy's within the right to reject any application, but you can't change something and make it better unless you know
what you did wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is the digital nomad / remote worker visa.
Wow, thank you.
In like 20 minutes.
Plus some other fun information at the beginning of our episode. Yes. That was great.
So unfortunately, like I said, there's not very much for this, but we do have on our website, we do talk about digital nomads a little bit more if that's something that is interesting to you in terms of making money abroad. Unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all. There are different jobs to be digital nomads. As Darcy mentioned, she's an oil painter, which is at the barest edge of digital, but
yeah, it's not really digital. I use the internet sometimes,
but so nomadic.
Yes.
So I think that helps, and you sell things online, so I think that helps. So that's a big thing. If you're interested, we have some information. But if there's anything else you'd like to know specifically about it, please absolutely reach out, and we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's everything. And then next week we will talk about, we have a couple episodes we wanted to do on some of just to kind of round up the living in Italy, especially I think we have one one more episode in April, two more, one in April, one in May, something like that. But we wanted to kind of round out this sort of, now that we've talked about how to move to Italy, we want to talk about some of the, I don't know, the stark realities, if you will, of living in Italy.
Absolutely. Because I think something that we want to, what's the word? We want to implore to all of you is that we're talking to you as if we're friends. Like, this is all advice we do give to people who we know face to face. And we don't want to just give you the happy, shiny, rose-colored glasses versions of this country. We want to give you some of the real information so that you know what you're getting into. So we're gonna talk about that in a couple of our new future episodes.
I think it's like one of our little picadillos. I think we realized it's like when we hear people who do live in Italy, not in a bad way, but like I think sometimes my mother, I love her dearly, and she will when somebody asks, like to us, it's just like, oh my God, this country is going to be the end of me. And then somebody in America is like, how is living in Italy? It must be amazing. She's like, oh my God, it's phenomenal. You're gonna love Italy. And I'm like, ma'am, you hate Italy. What are you talking about?
It's both.
Yes,
it is
both.
It's both of those things.
But we do try to be honest.
Yes.
Like when it comes to oh, Italy must be amazing. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm covered in mosquito bites. I got no AC. I am dying. Okay, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
but free healthcare.
So
almost free.
Very affordable.
Yeah.
No, so we just wanted to. There's a couple of things we wanted to talk about that were. Some of them I think not even some of them, I want to say all of them we learned after having moved here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I think 6 things we have in mind, 3 per episode. And they are things that I don't think they would have changed our moving here necessarily, but it would have been nice to know before we moved here, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think we still would have moved here anyway, but it was just like, oh, that's a fun thing to figure out once you're already in a place, rather than this would have been nice to know coming into the place.
Exactly.
And being prepared. And again, this all goes back to sort of managing and setting expectations, especially if you are somebody who is genuinely interested in moving here, and even if it's just for a few years, these are still important things about just, again, for a few years, even if it's not like I'm going to permanently move to Italy and settle down. It's more of like, I just want to be somewhere for a few years. Maybe you're retired. Maybe you're just kind of looking for a change. And so these are some little piece of information.
Yeah.
So with that being said, thank you all.
Thank you all. I think that was good. That was it.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, if you'd like to follow, you can do so on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Only a Bag Podcast on Instagram, as well as Only a Bag on Blue Sky. We were able to snag Only a Bag, and I love that. And you can go to our website, onlyabag.com, where we actually have an article about all this information already there. It's a giant, beautiful Visa article. It has all the information I think you need. If there's something that's lacking that you'd like to see on it, please reach out. You can do so also on onlyabag.com. And we have an email address if you'd like just to email us instead of, I guess, using the website, onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. Lastly, if you don't mind one more shilling for ourselves, we do have a coffee, ko-fi, in the description if you would like to donate a few dollars in as a way of just supporting the dream of helping other people come to Italy, move to Italy, travel in Italy, have a lovely time when you're here.
All those things.
So thank you all so much.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
We will talk to you next week.
Tanti abbracci.